Hell hath no fury like a ship is scorned. Yep, as far as debates go, they don't get any hotter or more hotly contested than comic book couples. The medium has been home to dozens of iconic relationships over the years, and while most have ended in tragedy on account of their ever-pesky refrigerator syndrome, there are certain items fans have come to cherish in DC and Marvel's shared history. Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, Peter Parker and Mary Jane, Kate Kane and Maggie Sawyer, these are the kind of names that invoke the unique kind of adoration only couples of that stature can. There are other pairings, however, that never garnered that same reaction, whether it be because they arrive from an ill-conceived or atrociously outdated storyline, or because a deviation from the norm proved to be a little too much for certain fans to accept. It's one thing to forever hold your peace, but when it comes to comics, it's clear that some couples should just remain apart. Forever. With that said, I'm Ewan from What Culture, and here are 10 controversial comic book couples fans hated. Number 10. Juggernaut and She-Hulk. In what could only be described as one of the most bizarre couplings in recent memory, She-Hulk and Juggernaut, as in on the Juggernaut, actually got together in pages of Uncanny X-Men some 14 years ago. The subject of countless jokes in the years since, the one-time pairing of Kane Marker and Jennifer Walters was promptly retconned with the revelation that it was a different She-Hulk who slept with Professor X's cousin, one from Earth 721. Convenient? Yeah, but that didn't stop the incident from becoming a running gag even after the retcon, with Marco's place on Walter's list of past conquests a frequent source of embarrassment for the former Fantastic Four member. Some of the jokes on display were, and still are, cringy as however, and even borderline misogynistic, with one in particular involving Wolverine turning down Walter's advances on account of, and I quote, him not wanting Juggernaut's sloppy seconds. Number 9. Barbara Gordon and Tim Drake. Although this particular relationship never made the leap to the medium itself, fans weren't all that pleased with Rocksteady's decision to make Tim Drake and Barbara Gordon, the last Batgirl and third Robin respectively, an item. It was a needless departure from the comics, where Babs and OG Robin Dick Grayson were commonly seen as the Bat fam's most iconic pairing, and in a storyline already plagued with issues, it stuck out like a sore thumb. There's certainly nothing wrong in making changes from the source material, because, as we've seen already, Rocksteady had managed to make some interesting alterations to the Bat canon in their creation of the Arkhamverse. The problem here, for many, is that it was a totally superfluous change, and an odd one too, all things considered. Tim had always been the youngest of the Robins, and with Babs and Dick having established themselves as Batman's first sidekicks, their eventual pairing felt organic. Wrong Robin, Rocksteady. Wrong Robin. Number 8. Superman and Wonder Woman. The New 52 was a lot of things, most of them bad, but one thing it definitely wasn't was kind to fans of classic DC continuity. Old storylines, characters, and relationships were chopped, changed, and mangled together to form a Frankenstein's monster of a continuity that only managed to last 5 or so years anyway. And while it did reignite interest in the DC universe, there were a number of creative decisions from DC editorial that didn't sit well with fans, some infinitely more worse than others. While Superman and Wonder Woman's relationship falls along the side of the publisher's minor offenses, that doesn't mean it wasn't controversial. And yeah, making Kal and Diana an item felt almost lazy compared to DC's other romances. Like, okay, both are super strong, both can fly, and both have some fairly patriotic costumes. There's a definite appeal in bringing two of DC's trinity together, but at the end of the day, it'll never amount to what Lois and Clark had. Number 7. Spider-Man and Black Cat. Spider-Man, like Batman, is another character that's had a ton of relationships over the years. It's the kind of history that makes fans play favourites, and when it includes both Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane Watson, chances are any newcomers aren't going to fare all that well with the masses. That's not to say that Felicia Hardy, the iconic Black Cat herself, hasn't had her fans, because she has. I'm one of them. Both her and Spider-Man have always had an interesting relationship, the kind of one that inspired an equally iconic coupling in Batman and Catwoman. But whereas that relationship seems destined to last, or at least be somewhat definitive, Black Cat and Spidey have struggled to find that same kind of relevance. There's buckets of chemistry between them, but much like with Superman and Wonder Woman, fans have already got their Spidey couple, with Gwen and MJ themselves dividing opinion between the character's biggest fans. Number 6. Bruce Wayne and Barbara Gordon. Batman the Animated Series is a cartoon that needs no introduction, and yet, while it was certainly a seminal series and an incredible one at that, there were some rather bizarre relationships that were bubbling beneath the surface. One such relationship was the one shared between Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne, the Batgirl and Batman of the Bat fam. Far be it from Bruce to actually entertain Bab's advances, which were few and far between in the show itself, it was always implied that her actual suitor would be Dick Grayson, much like it was in the comics. The idea still persisted though, with series writer Bruce Timm taking the same concept to his frankly diabolical adaptation of Alan Moore and Brian Boland's controversial storyline, The Killing Joke. Anyway, when Batman Beyond was brought back for DC Comics, the writers for the series decided that Dick Grayson's absence should have been explained, as it was never addressed in the show itself. The reason for his disappearance? Bruce had an affair with Barbara while they were together, and to make things worse, even had a child. Sake, Bruce. Sake. Number 5. Ant-Man and Wasp. Although they're an iconic couple, Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne's relationship is actually quite dire, considering their most famous moment involves a case of domestic violence. It's not just the fact that Scott Lang has overtaken Pym as the more iconic size-shifting Avenger, or that Nadia Pym is the more reputable hero to come from that family, but because Hank and Jan's relationship was so verifiably awful in the comics that Hank's declined over the years. It doesn't help that attempts have been made to rehabilitate Pym both on the page and off it either, and while it's clear that he wasn't all that there during this actual story arc, it's not a mitigating circumstance, certainly not for an issue as serious as this. There are plenty of terrible moments from Marvel's past that could rival Pym hitting his wife, including Reed Richards' constant attempts to patronize Sue Storm back in the 60s, but this is just beyond irredeemable. Number 4. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. The Ultimate Universe was a lot of things when it debuted, but one thing no one could have predicted was that it would be incestuous? While the alternate Earth pioneered by Mark Miller, Brian Bendis, and others was renowned for its fresh and reinvigorating take on the Marvel Universe, there were some decisions that the writers could have probably kept, one being the incestuous relationship between the Maximoff twins, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. In the main 616 continuity, the son and daughter of Magneto are just that, siblings. In the decidedly seedier and George R.R. Martin-y world of Ultimate Marvel, they are, however, romantically linked as well. What was at first hinted at by Miller became painfully obvious by the time Jeff Loeb got on the book, during which he decided to show a scene where Wolverine even walks in on them as they're presumably getting down, and it's about as gross as you'd expect. Not to say that this is one of the reasons why Marvel originally ditched the Ultimate Universe, but this is totally one of the reasons why Marvel decided to ditch the Ultimate Universe. Number 3. Scott Summers and Emma Frost. Marvel's X-Men comics have always had their fair share of melodrama, so it should come as no surprise to hear that the couple at the centre of it has, for the most part, always been Scott Summers and Jean Grey. With more breakups, makeups, and love triangles than most, it's fair to say that Scott and Jean haven't had it easy. When the melodrama was cranked up yet another notch altogether during Grant Morrison's run on New X-Men, the relationship again took a turn for the worse. This time because of a psychic affair. Yes, psychic affair. Yep, that's right. Cyclops had been cheating on his partner with none other than Emma Frost, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, and Jean Grey's worst adversary. It's an affair made worse by the fact that, when Jean kicked the bucket yet again, Scott forewent the mourning process altogether and made his relationship with Frost official shortly afterwards. It's a relationship exemplified by its sordidness by the fact Frost was caught wearing the Dark Phoenix outfit during the initial affair. Because, you know, nothing says excitement quite like the outfit your ex wore when she killed an entire planet and, you know, sacrificed herself so you could live. Jesus Christ, Scott. Number 2. Miss Marvel and her son. You know things are bad when you have to open an entry with a preemptive sigh, but here we go anyway. Just when you thought comics couldn't get any creepier or more misogynistic, in comes a little storyline from Avengers 200, which involves Miss Marvel falling in love with her own son. It gets worse too, because not only did she give birth to her own son, who she then fell in love with, it later transpired that she'd been raped by him too in order to ensure his own birth. The Avengers, seemingly ignorant to the trauma Carol's just endured, rush to congratulate her on the birth of this baby, and even offer encouragement when she later decides to spend an eternity in limbo with her now adult child, with no one protesting otherwise. Rectified by Chris Claremont a year later in a different X-Men comic, Carol Danvers' brainwashed relationship with her own son and the Avengers' tacit willingness to facilitate it remains one of the most repulsive storylines ever to have been published in the pages of a Marvel comic, and by far one of the worst couplings ever to have been put to print. Number 1. The Joker and Harley Quinn. To date, there has never been a relationship so fundamentally misused, misrepresented, or wrongly worshipped than the one shared between the Joker and Harley Quinn. Abusive to its very core, Joker and Harley's time together was typified by violence, psychological torture, and regret. And yet, it still somehow manages to resonate with misguided makeup YouTubers, writers, and, if reports are to be believed, movie executives as well. It's not funny, it's not endearing, and it most certainly isn't something to covet, especially now that Harley herself has managed to live on in the medium as a survivor and has a kick-ass girlfriend in Poison Ivy. It's a relationship that's been killed dead in the comics in recent years, and both Harley and DC are only stronger for it. While the films themselves seem to be playing catch-up in this regard, as well as a portion of the character's fans, it's clear that the Joker-Harley relationship's days are numbered. How fortunate we all are that this is, indeed, the case. And that's our list. Are there any other comic book couples you hate? Be sure to let us know in the comments below, and before you do, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and head back down to whatculture.com for more comics goodness every day. I've been Ewan, and I'll see you next time. Congrats, you made it to the end of this comics video. To my left there are 2 more that you might fancy watching. Beneath you can subscribe as always, and to my right there are 2 other What Culture channels that you might be interested in looking at.